So let's start then at the beginning with how on earth does all of this work? House of Lords AI Select Committee, just pause for a moment and think how lovely it is that the House of Lords has an AI Select Committee, says there should be two strands to this. Everybody needs to know something about this. And some kids are going to go a lot further with this and need a much deeper technical understanding of this. And I think our curriculum allows us to do both of those things. Who are the computing teachers in the room, please? That's more than I saw at first. Thank you very much. So you guys will be teaching this sort of thing in some form or another, that a computer is a machine that accepts input, that processes it according to a stored program and produces output. It's all fairly standard stuff, except it isn't really like that anymore. This link between the input and the output through the stored program, yes, that was how it was back in the good old days, but now it's really quite different. The link between input and output is determined by some sort of model, a machine learning model. What we have is we get to choose the training data. We get to choose how to build that model. We select the algorithm that uses that training data to build the model. But then the input and the output are related by something which has had very little human agency in coding that relationship. We give it this input, it produces that output, but the relationship between the two is no longer determined by the programmer sat there with green text on a black background writing lines of code, but by the training data we give it and by the algorithm that we select. And that, I think, changes things. So the whole large language model, ChatGPT, etc., how does that even work? Well, it's the same idea. There's training data, there's an algorithm selected, and then a model which determines the word that comes next. Are there any people in the room who are working in iPad-based schools? Okay, I've got a couple of you. Watch how the kids write stories on the iPad. Very often what they're doing is looking at the 3 suggested words for what comes next and tapping the one which they think best fits their story, or just tapping the middle one anyhow, because it doesn't really matter. I've written a story. No, you've not written a story. What you've got is the iPad's small language model to determine which words come next in the story. Once upon a, and the iPad will know that the next word is likely to be time. We've been familiar with this for, 10 years or so since Apple introduced this sort of technology. The large language model essentially does that. ChatGPT does that. It's predictive text, but at a much, much grander scale and much more sophisticated determination of the next word or token. GPT Playground, which lets you play with some of the parameters and look behind the screen a little, so you can go and see how it's determining what word comes next. So, give me 5 ways in which AI can be used to provide access to the curriculum. And it goes off and decides the first word to put there. And it says natural is going to be its first word, and then writes the next words, which are obviously going to be language processing NLP. Here it's predicting analyze as the word. Analyze wasn't its top choice. Its top choice was identify. But it has this sort of stochastic process of a degree of randomness going into this, which is why you give it a prompt the following day, and it produces different responses each time because of the random walk through the next likely word. And it is really very, very good at this. It is scarily good at this. We prompt in a language which we are familiar with. It responds in a language that we are familiar with, and it does this really very, very well, in such a way that a human responding to us like that would seem intelligent and articulate and knowledgeable and have understanding, whatever we understand by understanding. And so it deceives us into thinking that it is thinking, because it behaves in the sort of way that a person who's thinking would behave. It responds like that. We can find out a little about how GPT-3, 3.5 was trained. There is the technical paper there where they explain that process. And what it's done is look at loads of the web. There's this Common Crawl database that you can go and find. You can see all of the text on this bit of the open web. Web text 2 was derived from the links on Reddit. Put your hand up if you have a Reddit account. Okay, that's all right. That's a reasonably balanced demographic. There is some concern that the people who post to Reddit may not actually be typical of human race generally. We may not be normal people, folks. I've got it ready to count. Okay, and of course it's got loads of Wikipedia. It's paid a lot of attention to Wikipedia. It's paid a lot of attention to that web text too. You may be concerned then that the training data we've provided it with, sorry, we as a society, not we as developers, may not be entirely representative, what we're wanting to base things on. But, that's what it does, and it does it very well. There is a degree of supervised training goes on as well. People step into the loop to help refine this model. And again, you might wonder, are the rules that they're applying, is the way they're training the model to respond better than it would have done otherwise quite what we would want it to be? So there's potential bias in the training data, there's potentially bias in the training process, but it has done a remarkably good job. That was GPT-3, 3.5. GPT-4 is a slightly different story. The technical paper is out there, but it includes the phrase, "This report contains no further details about the architecture, including model size, hardware, training compute, dataset construction, training method, or similar." To what extent do they still deserve to be called open AI? Given how much we are coming to rely on this. So there's a lot of stuff out there about how teachers are using this already. There are lots and lots of tools around. So there's this TeachMate AI, which sits above GPT-3, 3.5, and just gives you the button-based interface for it. So create me a lesson plan. Click on the button, say what the subject is, say what the year group is, and then it creates a prompt out to GPT-3, 3.5, and comes back with your beautifully formatted lesson plan. You can do this yourself using the software directly. There's another one which is, what is it? Magic School AI, my favorite of which is the teacher joke generator, because after all, when have we not needed a teacher joke generator? The one thing worse than a teacher's joke is a teacher's joke generated by a machine intelligence, I'm sure. Okay. And then, the stuff which none of us like doing. Again, put your hand up if you enjoy writing school reports. Okay, I'm not surprised. This feels like a job for ChatGPT. Anytime where we can make this a little bit easier. In religious studies, Sophie did well in her exams, tried hard all term. Really, that's enough, but, clearly there's a box to fill on the report. So, go off GPT Playground and write the rest of the report. And it will do this gladly, as will ChatGPT for you. What is digital piracy? I've got to teach this lesson on digital piracy. Give me some content, give me something I can get my pupils to read. I could put this into slides if I wanted to. And it goes off and very happily generates content on any subject without a trace of irony. Remember, all of its words are words nicked off the interweb. It has no problem talking about digital piracy, very happy to do so. I want that to be accessible to the 11-year-olds. It is a text transformer. Give it text in one format, it will happily put that into another format, and so it rewrites that in language accessible to 11-year-olds. What is digital piracy? I've got to teach this lesson on digital piracy. Give me some content, give me something I can get my pupils to read. I could put this into slides if I wanted to. And it goes off and very happily generates content on any subject. Oh, I can tell them all of this, but once in a while I need to check whether they've learned all of this. So, here is my lesson plan for this. 15 minutes of I will demonstrate this, 15 minutes of we practice this. If you give it a format for the lesson plan, it will keep to that format. Don't say follow all 17 of Barak Rosenshine's principles, because it produces really bad lesson plans, as shouldn't come as a surprise. So yeah, we get to the assessment questions. Multiple choice questions it's fabulous at. And again, if your prompt is come up with plausible distractors, it will do that. If your prompt is come up with funny distractors, it has a go. What is digital piracy? Taking someone's boat using a computer. I don't know, it's not that funny, but it's having a go. How do people engage in digital piracy? They're training to be real pirates on the high seas. The lovely stuff with Midjourney and Dawley and Night Cafe have produced me the image to include on the PowerPoint deck about this.
And this slide is my attempt at using AI. And I thought my Computing Hub team, they're just such a good team. They've been so good at putting this stuff together. I thought, let's do an AI-generated picture of my team. But thank you. But you can see they've got Adam Gibson's hair color wrong, which is slightly worrying. He's a little bit grayer than that.
It will give very, very good feedback on essays. My university's rules say I still have to mark their work. I still have to write their feedback. Yay. Okay. But there's nothing to stop them getting feedback on their essay. And that's quite an effective way of doing this. And then the data stuff. You know, those of you in leadership positions will be familiar with graphs like this. So I give it last week's release of the performance tables from this summer's exams and say, look, have a look at the assessment scores from Key Stage 2, have a look at the Attainment 8 scores at the end of Key Stage 4, plot me a graph, and it goes off and plots the graph. Isn't that just fabulous that it can do all of this? You could do this at school level if you weren't worried about submitting pupil-level data to some strange machine intelligence. We then get to respond to its output and tweak that so we get to see. You should be aware, your pupils should be aware, that there are limits to this. All it is doing is predictive text. This is the next token in response to everything I've written so far and what you prompted me with. It doesn't understand. It just seems as though it understands. And, you know, Turing back in 1950 might have argued there is no difference between understanding and seeming to understand. I think there may be. It's really hard to put your finger on what that difference actually is. There's no reasoning built into this. This is just predictive text. So it doesn't think about this. All it is doing is telling you what comes next. There are problems with it in maths, although it's getting better at the maths. It can be overconfident. So it's, you know, how confident are you of this result is your prompt. It says, oh, I'm 99.9% confident. If one of my students asks me how confident I am about a thing, I will generally say, I am not sure. I think it's this. It seems reluctant to admit the gaps in its own knowledge. It notoriously hallucinates. It does make stuff up. And you need to be aware of that. Your students need to be aware of this. It isn't up to date, although you can pay for live browsing. So my daughter does this like maths extension thing. Simon Singh organizes this. And she types in this really difficult problem, and it comes up with a response to this. One number that satisfies these conditions is 63. 63 is odd and not a prime. When you reverse the digits and add them to 63, you get 72, which is a perfect square, 8 squared. You see what I mean about it? It makes stuff up. It's overconfident. That is clearly wrong. But, you know, hopefully my daughter spotted that was just nonsense. She does this debate thing, so she has to sort of be part of this house debating team and take an opposing view to the notion that rules are made to make our lives better. So, you know, she's got her ideas, gives the ideas to the machine, and it comes up and writes a speech for her. Final paragraph on the screen. Picture this. It's a sunny day. You feel the light breeze gently tousling your hair. You're comfortable, free, and in the moment. And then someone reminds you, hey, tuck in your shirt. And I worry a little about the tousled hair and the untucked shirt of exactly which political rhetoric it's channeling at that point. Your students, how are they using it? If you've not asked, ask when you're back in school tomorrow. Find out how they're making use of this. And it just gets better and better and better each day. So we had, I think, over the weekend, this release of the integration of a number of the plugins. So GPT-4 will draw on DALL-E, we'll do the data analysis and all of that now through a single interface. Microsoft now release or provide general access to their integration of Copilot into Office 365 if your institution is paying the premium for that. And putting it there inside the word processor suddenly feels quite different to going out to somebody else's website and start typing all of this. So it gets better. And she's got to revise over the half-term break, or she had to revise over the half-term break for her history exam on the Battle of Crécy. So ask ChatGPT to help with this. It will give you notes. Very happy at giving you notes, but it will also set you an essay question. And then, of course, she can respond to that. What's much more likely is get another machine learning algorithm to respond to this. So Bard, goes off and writes an essay in response to the prompt. I love that Bard gives you the three alternatives, and which do you think is best? And that's clearly, or I think that's going back into the training data set as to which is the better of these responses. It does a really good job. And then, she submits that to ChatGPT. It happily marks that and gives her feedback on it. Small repetition. Oh, it says the section is created. Bard writes, if you were a 12-year-old at the Battle of Crécy, this is what it would have felt like, which is a really nice thing to include in the essay. And GPT says, this section is a creative addition and does a good job of simplifying the battle's events. It's very, very positive feedback. It's what AI marking the other AI's work. So we've not got a grade out of this. We've got formative feedback. Can you give me a mark on the essay? Yeah, that was worth 18 out of 20. It's generated its own rubric in order to come out with a single numeric score. This is, for a learner, I think this sense of tutoring, entering into a dialogue, has so much potential. Good teachers will do this if they have the time. But providing this for anybody who's motivated enough, knowledgeable enough to want to try this. Oh, and then you throw it into the image generator and say, give me an illustration for my story, for my essay about the Battle of Crécy, in the style of an illuminated manuscript, and we get this. I particularly like the dragons, by the way, because most of the chroniclers of the time don't acknowledge Britain's air superiority at the Battle of Crécy. And her own work, again, is she uses this night cafe thing to create these fantasy or pictures. And I love the Oberon and Titania one. I'm less sure about the Snow White version there. In coding and computing education, write me a Scratch program which does the multiplication test up to 12 12s, and it goes off and produces faulty Scratch code. But that's a learning opportunity as to what's wrong with the code that you see on screen there. Exercise for the reader there. And, famously, Obama, when standing for president, was asked, what's the best way to sort 1 million 32-bit integers? You ask your A-level computer science students this question, and they will say either merge sort or quick sort, which are really good answers to what's the best way to sort a large number of things. It's the wrong answer to this question. The right answer to this question is a thing called radix search, because we look at the first bit and then the second bit and so on and work our way through the list. Much more efficient. GPT spots that, goes off and writes the code for you, gives a really nice explanation of how it works. Some things, it is way better than most humans are. I find that kind of threatening. I want to make use of this, getting something to help me with this. Some of you who are teaching computing at GCSE may remember the old, horrible OCR non-exam assessment tasks of write a program for this stupid dice game. And the solution emerged on the internet, probably on Reddit, amongst other places. And GPT is only too happy. They were allowed 20 hours under exam conditions to produce a response. And because the solutions were out there on the internet, Ofqual stepped in and said, you've got to stop this mid-year. There are no longer going to be any points awarded for the non-exam assessment. You still have to learn how to code, but you can't get any points for this because we cannot trust the reliability. If they'd let it run to the present, then, it goes off and writes you a solution to this and explains how it's worked, and all of that inside, I don't know, that's like 30 seconds of work for the machine intelligence to produce this. So this is problematic when it comes to assessment. And again, the Copilot stuff coming to Office on Wednesday, already there in VS Code, which is one of the development environments for writing code. You start typing in what your function is called, and then it auto-completes with, here, this is one way of finishing off your definition of this function, and stepping in there in the midst of the programming process. So tempting to just press tab and get its answer rather than thinking through this for yourself. So there are issues. Oh, and yeah, my digital media crowd. So I give it the historic weather records for Heathrow Airport going back to 1948. Say, produce me a visualization of this, of the average temperature year on year. And it produces this lovely warming stripes visualization immediately, which takes my second-year undergraduates like 3 hours of close, supported teaching in order to be able to do this. Is that cheating? one of the really nice areas of this is making the curriculum more accessible, making our teaching more inclusive by giving all of our pupils access to some of these tools. For the dyslexic pupil, having the page read aloud to them using the Seeing AI tool available for free on your phone. Just take a picture of it and get it to read that text aloud. You can do this with online text as well. So Microsoft's, what is it called, Immersive Reader, built into Office 365. It will very gladly put in all of the spacing for syllables. It will read it aloud to you in the accent of your choice. For a pupil who struggles to do the barking at print, decoding the grapheme to phoneme correspondence, this is such a powerful way of providing access to the curriculum for them. The other direction works amazingly well as well, dictating stories, essays to the computer. Rather than starting from a blank page, I can tell you what I think about this and allow it to just take down my notes and then edit those, or possibly throw it to ChatGPT and say, make this better later. And again, the interface just keeps getting better and better. The voice recognition and voice synthesis built into GPT-4, fabulous. The access to this from the phone, taking a picture of something, what does this picture show? All of that is there. No time for live demos. For my own students, we give them these academic papers to write and say, read all of this and then come into the lecture and tell us what you thought about this. Fine, this is a good part of being at university, but this is really hard for many of my students. If you're dyslexic, think what a challenge that is, when just reading the paper alone is hard enough. But give the paper to Claude AI, which is really good at working with PDF attachments, say, give me a summary of this, and I could read the screen there rather than the whole 16 A4 pages that we start with. Then, of course, I can take it a stage further, and I can say to Claude, okay, what are the problems with this paper? Provide for me a critique of this. It's very, very good at doing that as well. Remember, it seems as though it understands. And it tends to be quite fond of bullet points as a good set of notes for this. Okay, I can't submit this in my essay. Write this as a paragraph of prose. Put in the Harvard-style citations, and we get this, which is way better than what most of my students would be able to do for themselves. And here it is so tempting to do Control-C, Control-V, and just drop it into the essay. That's not allowed. This seems fine. Control-C, Control-V from this feels as though I've crossed a line there, which takes me on to the integrity issues. Oh, and we ought to talk about foreign languages as well. The built-in translation is just amazing. Think about your learners for whom English is not their first language. Of course you want them to develop their proficiency, their mastery of English. But sometimes being able to read complex text in their mother tongue may be the better thing to do. Being able to write in their mother tongue and then have it translated back into English may be, for sometimes, some of the circumstances, the right thing to do. One of the things they make me do is be a disciplinary officer, so my privilege to get to tell students off for cheating at assignments. So we're really struggling with this as to where we draw the line. What is okay, what isn't okay. We're very much committed to providing them with training which equips them for the workplace. Ignoring AI, ignoring generative AI would be wrong. So, I don't know, hands up is good for this. Do you think it is cheating if ChatGPT, etc., explains something to you, gives you ideas for your essay, suggests how to improve your essay, writes your essay for you? Yeah, okay, I think there is a broad consensus with every audience to whom I have ever asked this question, starting with 5-year-olds, ending with postgrads and folks such as yourself, that is where the line is drawn. And I think the reason is reasonably sensible. If a student comes to me and says, could you explain this to me? I will do that. I teach, it's what I do. Give me some ideas for my essay. Yes, of course I will do that. Generally we do that as part of the brief, but sometimes we have to tell them again. Suggest how to improve your essay. I wish I had more time to do this. But a student who says, I've had a go. This is my first draft. How do I make this better? I will very happily, if I can find the time, read it and suggest some ways of improving this. A student who comes to me and says, could you write my essay for me? I think they're not going to ask because they know what the response is likely to be. Students will generally not ask one another to do their work for them. But I'm quite comfortable with my students doing any of those top three with one another, with me, or with the machine intelligence. The last one, definitely not a good idea. The Control-C, Control-V is, I think, where we draw the line. Our friends at JCQ say, you as schools need to know that it's their work. If this is going to be formally assessed, counting towards a grade, you have to know that it's their work you're marking. And I'm really interested in how you're going to know that, short of bringing them into a room, turning off the internet and making them do it in front of you. It's a really hard question to how can you have that assurance? Oh, and then, why do you want to be a teacher? You know, when they apply to us for a place on the course, there are basically two things I'm looking for. Do you have any computer science knowledge, and do you want to work with children and young people? And, you know, evidence of both will generally get them an interview. What if I say I've got a degree in computer science, I've been helping out in a local coder dojo? I cannot just put that on the form. Although, in my case, that would actually get you to the interview. Really, it would. They feel they've got all of those words to fill, yeah? And so it's so tempting to make the machine intelligence write that. And it will do a really good job of writing a personal statement. What should I do if I'm suspicious that a personal statement has not been written by the person, but by them throwing it at a machine? Do I change my mind about the rule? Then, if I become suspicious that they've cheated. I wrote this, or rather I got the machine to write this in response to a prompt. So I can send it to GPT-0 and say, is this written by one of you, or was this written by one of us? And it says, well, there seems like an 80% chance that was written by one of my brethren rather than one of you people out there. And of course, on this occasion, I know that it was written by the machine. But should I do that? This is not an easy question, folks. It really is. I'm not giving you an answer here. GDPR, Data Protection Act, says you have to keep people in the loop. If it's a decision which affects somebody's life, there should be a person involved. It can't just be the machine that says that. Keir Starmer talking about, talk as the currency of learning. This is a medium of instruction. It's the medium of the talk I'm giving now. And now we interpose the machine in that. Anthony Seldon talking about this idea that learning should be hard. The stuff you remember, or much of the stuff that you remember really well, will be the stuff that you struggled with the first time round. And if suddenly we let the AIs make all of that so easy, I don't ask my students to write essays because I need to know the answer to these questions. It's because by thinking about this and reading about this, they come to learn and, understand this. Putting the machine in to just do the work for them does away with all of that. And our Department for Education are committed to a knowledge-rich curriculum, saying knowledge still matters. We have to put this right at the core of the curriculum. Okay, and just the irony of before I can even use GPT, I'm the one who has to prove that I'm human in order to be able to access its services. There's a good reason for that, but it just strikes me as very odd. So there is this whole thing about, will the machines take over the world? I don't think GPT is likely to do that. It is just predictive text. But, I may be wrong. I really rather hope that I'm not wrong. Tell you what, though, when they learn to tick this box, that's when we need to be worried. They can't yet. I told you about the GPT-4 technical paper. This is one of the things they actually tested. So they got an independent evaluator to come in and check whether it could, create an account on, what is it called? The TaskRabbit, and pay a human being to go and tick the box for them. And, what if the human says, but you might be a machine? No, I'm visually impaired. I really struggle with these captures. Please tick this box for me. And it turns out that actually GPT-4 was unable to actually draw these resources into itself. But who knows? GPT-5, it's only a matter of time, I'm sure,